At my dad's inheritance dinner. I overheard them laughing about giving me an empty envelope to humiliate me, calling me a parasite, a joke, not even family. I smiled, played along. This morning, they're flooding my phone, begging me to stop. I was standing in the middle of my parents' Denver living room 3 weeks ago, staring at the manila envelope in my father's hand, already knowing that whatever was inside it wasn't meant to help me. It was meant to hurt me. But what I didn't know, what I hadn't realized until about 5 minutes earlier, was just how far my family had gone this time. My name's Elias. I'm 29, the so-called unstable, one of the Calderon family. And that night flipped my entire world inside out. Dad, Ronald, had called this some kind of legacy dinner. No spouses, no partners, just immediate family. My mom, Teresa, cooked like she was hosting a political fundraiser. My sister Marley, perfect child number 1, flew in from Minneapolis. And my brother Grant, the golden boy banker, even canceled a weekend trip to Vail so he could attend what my father called a defining moment. The whole thing felt staged from the minute I walked through the door. The smiles were too tight, the air too formal, and Dad kept checking his watch like the event couldn't start without the right lighting. But the real gut punch came when I stepped out to use the bathroom. I wasn't gone long, maybe 2 minutes, but when I walked back toward the dining room, the house was suspiciously quiet. That's when I heard them, my entire family. In my father's study, door half closed, voices lowered but not enough. I inched closer. Grant was laughing, a sharp, cruel sound he usually reserved for coworkers he thought were beneath him. Mom was whispering something about how this would finally put Elias in his place. Marley said she hoped I wouldn't cry too quickly because she wanted to catch my real reaction first. But my father said something I will never forget. Tonight ends the fantasy. He's not a real Calderon. Not where it counts. I froze. I thought I misheard him. Not a real Calderon? Then I heard the other thing. The part that twisted the knife in a way I didn't see coming. Mom asked if he had told her about the envelope. Dad said no. Dad said she didn't need to know yet. Dad said, it's better if this hits him all at once. Her? Who the hell was her? I stood there, heart pounding, brain trying to fill in blanks I didn't even know existed. And then I saw it. Grant pulling out his phone, showing them something on the screen. A video recording app. He said he'd already figured out how to angle it so they'd catch my face the second I opened the envelope. My own family was plotting to humiliate me, record me, laugh at me. But the part about her, that was new. That was worse. That was something else entirely. By the time I walked back to the dining room and sat down, my hands were shaking. My mind was spinning. And a cold truth settled deep in my bones. They weren't just excluding me. They were hiding something. Something big. Something about me. They filed back in moments later, practically vibrating with anticipation. Dad placed the manila envelope in front of me like it was a death sentence. Mom subtly angled her phone. Marley smirked. Grant nodded at Dad. Ronald Calderon cleared his throat, ready to deliver the speech they had clearly rehearsed. But I didn't even hear the first part, because all I could think about was that one sentence. He's not a real Calderon. And the woman they were hiding. I opened the envelope, and what I saw wasn't the real shock. The real shock came after. Growing up, I always felt like the odd piece in a puzzle that technically fit but clearly belonged to a different box. I never said that out loud, though, because in the Calderon house, anything that hinted at emotional discomfort got labeled as drama or attention-seeking. My father, Ronald, ran the family like a Fortune 500 company, and every one of us had a title. Grant was the successor. Marley was the example. My mom, Teresa, was the handler. And me, I was the wild card, which was their polite way of saying problem. The funny thing, I was never actually a problem. I didn't fail school. I didn't get arrested. I didn't do drugs. My worst mistake was asking for help during a rough financial stretch after college. Something reasonable adults do sometimes, especially when rent in Denver is basically theft with paperwork. But in my family, Needing help, even temporarily, became a personality trait. I got labeled. And once they labeled me, they never let me change. When I was growing up, Dad used to brag about how he raised us to be self-sufficient, which meant he took credit for everything Grant and Marley accomplished and blamed me for anything I struggled with. If I got a B in a class, it was because I wasn't applying myself. If I got a promotion at work later in life, it was because I finally listened to one of his outdated lectures he assumed had shaped me. But here's the part that hits differently now. My dad was obsessed with bloodlines. He talked about Calderon legacy more than he talked about normal things like hobbies or friends or literally anything human. If you didn't look, act, or succeed the way he believed a Calderon should, you weren't just a disappointment. You were a threat to the image he projected to the world. Back then, I didn't understand why he nitpicked my face, why he compared my nose to no one in our family, why he joked that I must have looked like one of Mom's uncles on the wrong side of the family tree, why he called me a genetic gamble that didn't pay off. I laughed it off like he expected me to, but I remembered every word. I remembered how he acted weird the first time I beat Grant at something, when I outran him at a middle school track meet. Dad brushed it off as a fluke and said I must have had a good win day. He never said, "Good job." Not once. I remembered how he always introduced Grant and Marley with their achievements and introduced me with jokes. "This is Elias. He's figuring life out, aren't you, buddy? Elias keeps us on our toes. One day he'll get there." But the thing that sticks in my throat now? My mom went along with it. Every single time. I genuinely thought my family just wasn't good with emotions. That maybe I was overthinking things. That maybe they just didn't realize how deep the cuts went. Until that night in the hallway. Until I heard what I heard. Because suddenly all those comments about me being different weren't harmless anymore. They sounded like breadcrumbs that led to something bigger. Something they'd been keeping from me for a long damn time. And the more I replayed the scene in the study, the more something else started bothering me. Who was her? Why did Dad say she didn't need to know yet? And what the hell did that have to do with me? There had always been secrets in the Calderon house. Missing documents, whispered conversations, topics that got shut down the second I walked into a room. But that night, everything sharpened. Everything pointed to the same truth. My family wasn't just cruel. They were hiding something so big it could crack the entire Calderon facade in half. And I was the only one who wasn't supposed to know. After that dinner, after that empty envelope with its smug little message, and the way my family watched me like spectators waiting for a public meltdown, I didn't go home. I drove to a cheap motel just outside Aurora and sat on the edge of a stiff mattress staring at the wall, replaying every word I'd overheard. He's not a real Calderon. She doesn't need to know yet. It was like someone had taken my entire life and snapped it in half. At first, I honestly thought I was spiraling, like maybe I'd misheard. But then I remembered the looks, the smirks, the anticipation, the rehearsed cruelty, the way it all seemed coordinated. My whole childhood started to feel like a setup I hadn't recognized. The next morning, I woke up to 14 missed texts from Mom asking if I was calm yet. 2 from Grant telling me not to overreact. 1 from Dad saying we needed to have a man-to-man talk about responsibility. I blocked all 3. I took the day off work. I drove around Denver aimlessly. The more I thought, the more details started connecting in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Like how every official document in our house, the family records, birth certificates, old photos, were always kept in Dad's locked file cabinet in his study. He never let anyone near that thing, not even Mom. Or how my own birth certificate had always looked off, faded, a little warped around the edges, like it had been printed on different paper. When I asked about it once in high school, Mom brushed it off as hospital mix-ups. Dad glared at me like I'd asked something disrespectful. Or how every time I mentioned wanting to take a DNA test just for fun, when those ancestry kits became popular, Dad shut it down hard, harder than necessary. The last time I brought it up, he slammed his hand on the table and said, "There's no reason for you to go looking for answers you don't need." Back then, I laughed it off. Now, it echoed like a warning I missed completely. The following week, people from the extended family started reaching out in weird ways. My cousin Ava messaged me on Instagram asking if everything was okay. She said my mom had told the entire family I'd had a psychological episode. My Aunt Carmen emailed me a long paragraph filled with vague spiritual advice. My Uncle Roberto sent a voice memo asking if he needed to intervene with my father. Something was happening behind the scenes, and they were trying to manage it. Then something even stranger happened. 3 days after the dinner, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, an old one, grainy, like it had been developed decades ago. It was of my mother, younger, maybe early 20s. She was holding a baby that wasn't me. There was a date on the back, May 1994. I was born in December 1995. The handwriting said, "You should know the truth before they bury it again." No name, no explanation, just that. My stomach dropped. My hands shook. I stared at the handwriting until the letters blurred. Because here's the thing. My parents always told me Mom struggled to get pregnant with me. But this picture, this date, it didn't match any timeline I'd ever been told. And when I called the hospital I was supposedly born in, just to check something stupid, I learned something I wasn't prepared for. They had no record of Teresa Calderon delivering a baby on my birthday. None. My entire childhood snapped into place with horrifying clarity. Whatever secrets they were hiding, whatever identity they were stashing away, it wasn't small. It wasn't harmless. And it sure as hell wasn't something they expected me to uncover. I didn't sleep the night I learned the hospital had no record of my birth. I just sat in my car outside a 24-hour diner on Colfax, staring at the photograph of my mother holding a baby who wasn't me. That picture felt radioactive in my hands. By sunrise, I knew I needed answers. Real ones. Not the polished, Calderon-approved versions I'd been fed my whole life. So I did something I knew would piss my father off more than anything. I drove straight to my parents' house. But I didn't knock. I knew Dad kept every important document in his study. I'd seen him lock that file cabinet my entire childhood. The same cabinet they had all crowded around the night they planned my humiliation. The same cabinet that held Calderon legacy paperwork. The same cabinet I suddenly felt sick around. Mom was out doing errands. Dad was at the gym. The house was empty. I walked into the study and stared at that file cabinet like it was a bomb I needed to disarm. The lock was old, and Dad never upgraded his security like he claimed he would. I found the spare key easily. He kept it taped to the underside of his desk drawer, because of course he did. He always underestimated me. I opened the cabinet. I expected birth certificates, property deeds, random tax documents. I didn't expect the folder labeled Elias, 1996 adoption files. My entire body went numb. Couldn't breathe. Inside were papers I had never seen before in my life. Legal forms. Signatures. A letter from a private adoption agency in Fort Collins. Receipts. Hospital intake records from another facility entirely, one I'd never heard mentioned in our family history. Then I found the page that snapped my world clean in half. Bio mother, Marina Reyes. Bio father, unknown. I had never seen that name before. Not once. Not in passing. Not in whispers. Not in any story told at any family gathering. I grabbed the second document, hands shaking so badly the pages rattled. It was a sworn statement from my mother, Teresa Calderon, dated January 1996, stating, "We have chosen not to disclose the adoption to the child at this time." But it wasn't just the adoption. It was the note clipped to the back of the file. Written in my father's handwriting. Maintain the Calderon image. The truth would ruin everything. Couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I was adopted, and they had lied to me for 29 years. They'd built their entire family identity on Calderon bloodlines, all while knowing I wasn't their blood at all. But that wasn't the worst part. Under Dad's note was another sheet, this one folded in half, like it was meant to stay buried. It was a letter from her, the woman they'd been hiding, handwritten, shaky, emotional, dated 5 months ago. It said, "I'm trying again. I just want to know if my son is okay. Please, just let me see him once." I regret letting you take him. I regret believing you when you said you'd tell him. His name is Elias. Please, I'm running out of time. My heart stopped. My biological mother had reached out recently, and my parents, my adoptive parents, had hidden it. They had hidden her. They had hidden me. They had been lying for almost 3 decades. And they were still lying. I was about to fold the letter back when I heard a voice behind me. Cold, controlled, familiar. What the hell do you think you're doing? Dad was standing in the doorway, and he didn't look angry. He looked terrified. Dad didn't yell. He didn't lunge at me. He didn't try to grab the folder out of my hands. He just stood there in the doorway of his study, face pale, jaw tight, eyes darting between me and the open file cabinet like he was watching a fuse burn down toward explosives he personally wired. I didn't say a word at first. I just held up the letter, the one from my biological mother. His face twitched. There it was. The truth. The guilty flinch. He knew I'd found everything. Put that down, he said quietly. Too quietly, like he was afraid the walls might hear. No, I said. Not this time. The tension in the room got so thick I thought I might choke on it. Dad stepped inside, shut the door behind him, and lowered his voice. You don't understand what you're doing. No apology. No explanation. No regret. Just control. That was the moment everything in me hardened. All the confusion, all the hurt, all the shock. It condensed into something sharp and cold. I understand exactly what you've been doing, I said. He took a step forward. I took a step back. He didn't like that. You had no right to dig through my files, he snapped. You had no right to steal my entire life and hide it. I shot back. His mouth opened, then closed. His face went blank in that creepy, professional way he used whenever he wanted to intimidate people during arguments. Elias, listen to me. There are things you don't know. Things you shouldn't know. Things that woman... Don't call her that woman. I snapped so sharply it startled even me. His nostrils flared. You are a Calderon. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me lies. Silence. Real, heavy silence. He tried a different tactic, calm dad voice, the manipulative one. Your biological mother was unstable. That's why she gave you up. That's why we kept her out of your life. She would ruin everything you've worked for. Interesting phrasing. Everything I've worked for. Not everything we've worked for. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting the image of the family he curated like a museum exhibit. I realized then that if I didn't handle this smartly, he'd bury every piece of evidence before I could do anything with it. So I made a decision. I memorized everything I saw. I photographed every document with my phone while he wasn't close enough to see. I slipped the letter from my biological mother into my jacket pocket without breaking eye contact. And then, I pretended to fold. I took a long breath and said, Fine, let's talk. He relaxed just enough. I wasn't trying to calm him. I was buying time, because I wasn't staying in that house another minute. And I definitely wasn't giving him the chance to spin this into another narrative where I was the irrational one. I left quickly. He followed me to the driveway, telling me I was misinterpreting everything, and that I needed to keep this private for the sake of the family. For the sake of the family. Translation: don't expose me. I drove away without looking back. The plan formed before I even got home. It was simple. 1. Make copies of everything. 2. Find my biological mother, she was the missing piece. 3. Confront my family with the full truth on my terms. 4. And most importantly, strip Dad of the one thing he valued more than money, more than reputation, more than legacy. Control. He'd spent decades shaping a fake story about me. Now I had the real one, and I was finally ready to use it. I spent the next 2 days digging for every piece of information I could find on Marina Reyes, the woman who, according to the documents Dad hid, gave birth to me. And I hit dead end after dead end. No current address, no social media, no recent public records. Just an old P.O. box in Pueblo that had been closed for over a decade. But the letter she wrote, dated only 5 months ago, meant she was out there, alive. searching for me. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to someone in my extended family. My Aunt Carly, Mom's older sister who lived near Boulder, was the only one who'd ever treated me like a real person instead of a family disappointment. And the moment she picked up the phone, she sounded worried. "Elias? Are you okay?" "Not really," I said. "I need to ask you something." I told her everything. Not the whole adoption part. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. But I asked her if she knew a woman named Marina Reyes. Silence. A long one. Then she sighed, and her voice dropped. "Elias. You weren't supposed to know that name." My chest tightened. "So you do know her?" "I knew of her," she said carefully. "Your mother and father made it clear that no one was allowed to talk about her around you." "And why is that?" I said. I heard her swallow on the other end. "Because your parents weren't honest about what happened back then, and they threatened to cut off the family if anyone interfered." That sent a cold wave through me. My parents had always been controlling, but that level of control? Over adults? Over information? Over history? "How much do you know, Carly?" I asked. "Not everything," she said. "But I know Marina wasn't unstable. That was Ronald's lie. She was young, alone, and your mother felt threatened by her. She wasn't supposed to give you up the way she did." "What does that mean?" I whispered. Another pause. A heavier one. "Elias, I think you should talk to someone who was actually there." "Who?" "Your uncle, Matthew." The name hit me like a punch. Uncle Matthew, my dad's estranged younger brother, hadn't spoken to the family in 20 years. My parents always said he moved to Arizona after some personal failures. They painted him as unreliable, irresponsible, bitter. Now I was starting to wonder if that was just their favorite tactic. Character assassination through narrative control. Carly gave me his number, and within an hour I was calling it. He answered on the first ring. "Is this Elias?" he said, like he'd been waiting. "Yes." A heavy breath on his end, like he'd been holding it for decades. I was wondering when this day would come. My grip tightened on the phone. "Do you know who my biological mother is?" "Yes," he said. "And your father will do anything to stop you from finding her." My stomach dropped. "Why?" Silence. Then his voice tightened. "Because you weren't supposed to be adopted. Not legally. Not the way it happened. And Ronald, he lied to all of us. He cut deals. He hid evidence. He burned documents." My throat went dry. "Burned documents? What kind of deals?" I asked. "That's not the twist you need to hear, Elias," he said. His voice lowered. "You were never supposed to go to Ronald and Teresa." A beat. "You were promised to someone else." My entire world tilted. "What?" I whispered. "Someone else was supposed to adopt you," he said. "Someone who fought for you. Someone who loved you." Cold sweat broke across my spine. "And Ronald stole you from them." Couldn't breathe. "Who?" I choked out. He exhaled like the truth weighed 1,000 pounds. "Your biological mother's sister. Your aunt. She was supposed to raise you. And your parents did everything they could to destroy her." My hands shook violently. The phone almost slipped. This wasn't just a secret. This wasn't just a lie. This was something darker. Something illegal. Something my father hid because it could blow up everything he built. I drove to Uncle Matthew's the next morning. 6 hours straight through Colorado heat, my hands shaking the entire drive. He lived in a beat-up adobe house outside Flagstaff, the kind of place people disappear to when they don't want to be found. When he opened the door, he looked at me like he'd been bracing for this moment since the day I was born. We sat at his kitchen table. No small talk. No fake pleasantries. He poured coffee, lit a cigarette, and started talking like the words had been acid in his mouth for 29 years. "Your father didn't adopt you out of love," he said. "He adopted you out of spite." Every muscle in my body tightened. Spite? Against who? Marina? My biological mother. He shook his head. "No. Against your aunt." I blinked. "My biological mother's sister?" "No," he said quietly. "Against his sister." Took a full 10 seconds for that to make sense. My aunt? Dad's sister. He nodded, and my stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. Her name was Lena Calderon, a name I had never heard once in my entire life. Ronald erased her, Matthew said. Scrubbed her out of the family. Told everyone she moved away. Said she cut contact. That she wanted nothing to do with us. But that was a lie? All of it, he said. Your father hated her. Because she wasn't like him. She didn't care about money, or reputation, or legacy. She was the only one in the family he couldn't control. He leaned back, eyes distant. Lena worked at a women's shelter in Fort Collins. That's where she met Marina. When your biological mother got pregnant, scared, alone, no family support, it was Lena who stepped in. Lena who took her to doctor appointments. Lena who helped her file paperwork. Lena who promised Marina she'd adopt the baby and give him a real home. My throat closed. Not the Calderons. Not Ronald and Teresa. Lena. She was ready to raise you, Matthew said. She had the crib, the room, everything. I felt my pulse in my teeth. Then what happened? Matthew stubbed out his cigarette. Ronald found out. The room felt colder suddenly. He couldn't stand the idea of Lena having something meaningful, something important, something that didn't fit his perfect little hierarchy. He hated that she defied him, hated that she was choosing her own life. So he stepped in. He told Marina he and Teresa would adopt you. He promised stability, money, a strong family. Told her Lena wasn't reliable. Said she was too emotional to raise a child. I wanted to throw up. Marina didn't know the truth, Matthew said. She thought Ronald and Teresa were close to Lena. She thought it was a family decision. She thought she was doing what was best for you. My chest tightened, every breath sharp. But Ronald only wanted one thing, he continued. To punish Lena. To take something from her she could never get back. My vision blurred. He stole me from her, I whispered. Yes, he said. And when Lena confronted him, when she realized what he did, your father burned every document connecting you to her. He told everyone she was unstable. He turned the whole family against her. Ruined her reputation. Made her the villain. I felt sick, shaking, angrier than I'd ever been. Where is she now? I managed. Matthew hesitated. She died 11 years ago. Felt like the ground cracked open beneath me. A hollow ache spread through my chest. Grief for a woman I never knew, never even got the chance to love. A woman who fought for me harder than the people who raised me. She died thinking she failed you, Matthew said softly, because your father made sure she never got near you again. And then he told me the part that turned my anger into something sharp and lethal. Your father doesn't care that you found out, he said. What he cares about, what he's terrified of, is that your biological family isn't done. My heart thudded. What does that mean? Matthew slid a folded piece of paper across the table. A recent address. A real one. Your biological mother isn't the only one looking for you, he said. Your father knows. That's why he wanted to break you, humiliate you, make you disappear from your own story. I gripped the paper so hard it crumpled. My father didn't just hide the truth. He built his entire life on the destruction of the two women who tried to protect me. And now, he was about to learn what happens when the child you spent years trying to control finally understands exactly what you are. I drove back to Denver with the address Matthew gave me tucked in my pocket like a live wire. It belonged to someone connected to my biological mother, someone Dad was terrified of. But before I met them, before I brought anyone else into this mess, I needed to face the people who created it. I needed to finish this with my parents. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't call. I didn't warn them. I just showed up at the Calderon house on a quiet Thursday night like a storm rolling over the Front Range. Mom opened the door, eyes already wet, voice trembling. Elias, sweetheart, we've been so worried. I walked right past her. Dad was at the kitchen island, wine glass in hand, pretending to read the business section. When he looked up and saw me, he froze. Not angry, not relieved, not even guilty, just exposed. Sit, I said. He didn't move. Sit. He sat. I placed the adoption folder on the table. The documents. The letters. The evidence he'd spent half his life guarding. Mom looked at them like they were snakes. Dad opened his mouth, but I cut him off. No explanations. No lectures. No stories. You lie when you breathe. Tonight you listen. He went quiet. Good. I started with the basics. The adoption. The secrecy. The years of manipulation disguised as parenting. Mom sobbed. Dad stared. But then I dropped the real bomb, the part he thought he buried forever. Aunt Lena. His face drained of all color. I know everything, I said. How you stole me out of spite. How you destroyed her life. How you let her die thinking she failed me. How you lied to everyone, including me, for almost 30 years. Mom whispered, Ronald? Oh my God. Dad didn't look at her. He looked at me. The mask slipped. What stared back at me was cold, calculating, and entirely himself. She disobeyed me, he said finally. She always undermined me. She wanted to raise you to hate me. She wanted to raise me to be loved. I snapped. Something you were never capable of. His jaw clenched. You think you'd have a better life with her? She had nothing. Nothing, I said, except integrity. That hit him harder than yelling ever could. I waited until he spoke again. But all he managed was a weak, defensive, "You're being dramatic." That was all I needed to hear. I stood, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the counter toward him. I made copies of everything. Physical, digital, cloud backups. Extended family already got an anonymous package with the highlights. If anything happens to me, or if you try to hide or destroy a single document, the entire file goes public. Mom gasped. Elias, please. No. We're done with please. We're done with pretending. Dad's face was tight with rage, but underneath it, fear flickered. Real fear. Because his whole identity, Mr. Calderon, patriarch of the perfect legacy, would crumble the second the truth came out. You don't get to shape my story anymore, I said. You don't get to rewrite my life. And you sure as hell don't get to hide the people who tried to protect me. Dad finally spoke through gritted teeth. What do you want? I looked him dead in the eyes. Nothing, I said. Not your money. Not your name. Not your legacy. I want distance. I want peace. And I want you to live long enough to watch everything you built fall apart, without me holding it up for you. Mom broke down. Dad didn't move. I walked to the door, turned back once and said, You didn't lose a son. You lost control. I left and didn't look back. The next week, I met the person tied to my biological mother, a cousin who'd been searching for me for years. She cried when she saw me, hugged me like she'd known me since birth, told me Marina was still alive, still waiting, still hoping. I'm meeting her next month. My real beginning starts there. My parents, they've called, texted, sent letters, begged, bargained, manipulated, threatened. I blocked everything. Grant tried to guilt-trip me. Marley quietly texted that she understands why I walked. Extended family is buzzing with the truth. Dad is no longer the admired Calderon patriarch. He's the man who destroyed his sister's life. The man who stole a child. The man who lied for decades. And he knows every single person he tried to impress now sees him clearly. As I drove away from Denver last week, starting the long road toward my biological family, I felt something I've never felt before. Freedom. Real, full, unshakable freedom. And for the first time in my life, I whispered to myself, I wasn't the disappointment. I was the threat. A threat to the lies they lived in. A threat to their legacy. A threat to the empire Dad built on cruelty. Turns out he was right to fear me, because truth was the inheritance he never wanted me to have. And I took it anyway.